What's up, YouTube and Podcast Nation? Welcome to the From Setbacks to Success channel, YouTube channel and podcast. I'm your host, Quincy Benton. And guess what? I'm a felon. Not only have I served time in federal prison, I'm actually here today, right now, at the federal prison I served time in, which is FCI El Reno, here in El Reno, Oklahoma, which is about 45 minutes west of downtown Oklahoma City. But I've also been divorced. I've experienced a bankruptcy as well as a house fire. Some of you too have gone through some setbacks in your life as well. Setbacks such as a divorce, maybe it's a job loss, or maybe even you've lost your home through some type of natural disaster such as a hurricane or a tornado. Well, I want you to know that in this channel, we're here to provide hope, and we want you to know that there's a way to get through the interviews that you will find on this channel, as well as the content that we'll be providing, like the content today. You'll find tips, success strategies on how to get back in the game and succeed. If this sounds like content you would be interested in, please smash that like button and please subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you as a part of our community. So today's topic is going to be, I know, possibly a controversial topic, but I think is one that is past time that we need to discuss and bring to the national conversation. The topic of this episode is going to be defund the Federal Bureau of Prisons, also known as the FBOP, as well as the United States Department of Justice, otherwise known as the DOJ. And the reason I say that this is going to be a controversial topic is because these are two really big organizations, and I know that this is probably partisan in some ways in terms of some of the beliefs involved into why these two departments in our United States government are so heavily funded. But I want to, again, I think that this is a conversation that needs to happen because there's just some disturbing trends that are happening with men in particular, African-American men and Hispanic men specifically, that need to be addressed and need to change. So that's going to be reasons for this topic today. Also, I want to start off by giving a big shout out to two people. One, I want to shout out to the men that I served time with here at El Reno during my time, as well as the men who have served time in the United States Federal Prison. I hope that you are out right now watching this video, that you are getting back on track, you're spending time with your family and loved ones. Again, big shout out to the men that I've served time with. I hope that you're out and that you're doing well. And then second, I want to give a shout out to someone who is leading the cause right now that I'm linking up with, and that's Van Jones. Big shout out to you, Van Jones, and what you're doing with your organization, with Dream Corps USA, the Justice Division of I'm totally supportive of that. I've recently talked with some representatives with his organization, and we'll be linking up with them to continue to promote this message. But going into the meat of things, and I'll have to kind of we'll have to dig more into some of the data and the facts and statistics. I'm going to start out by giving a complete breakdown of our government's organizational structure and the various agencies within this structure that are all involved in capturing, imprisoning men and women in the United States. I'll start out with the United States Department of Justice, aka the DOJ, which is the parent department that houses all of the other federal agencies that work to execute the DOJ's goals. These agencies include the Federal Bureau of Prisons, also known as the BOP, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, also known as the DEA, United States Attorney's Office, also known as the USAO, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, the National Security Division, NSD, and the United States Marshals Service, the USMS. Just for a side note, the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, is not a part of the DOJ. So, some additional statistics I want to highlight here is that The DOJ's budget for 2021 totals $31.7 billion. Their budget is split 5 major ways, with the most of the money going to law enforcement and prisons and detention, which we'll get into that a little bit later, which is essentially the BOP, and also litigation. So each year, the DOJ asks for more money to fund its budgets. Right now, the DOJ is asking for $8 billion more dollars for fiscal year 2022. That will bring its total budget to a whopping $40 billion. So there are 4 major goals and objectives of the Department of Justice. They are goal number 1, to enhance national security and counter the threat of terrorism. Goal number 2, which is to secure the borders and enhance immigration enforcement and adjudication. Goal number 3, reduce violent crimes and promote public safety. And goal number 4, promote rule of law, integrity, and good government. For our discussion today, we're going to focus on the following sub-agencies of the DOJ. These particular agencies will be the DEA, the FBI, the USAO, the United States Attorney's Office, and the ATF, as well as the Federal Bureau of Prisons, or the BOP. Just again, for those who are not as familiar with how this department works in our government and these sub-agencies of the Department of Justice, just to give you kind of a brief glimpse, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and the USAO work on the front end to investigate, arrest, indict, then convict men and women for breaking federal laws. Once indicted, which is simply a word that the federal government used for meaning that you are being charged for breaking federal law, the DOJ, a whopping 98.5% conviction rate of men and women in federal court. Again, I'll let that number sink in for a minute. 98.5% conviction rate in federal court. In addition to their overwhelming conviction rate percentage, on average, a man or woman will be sentenced to serve at least 12 years in federal prison, where you will serve a minimum 85% of that time that you were sentenced. Once convicted, the last agency, the BOP, takes you into custody, where you'll serve out the duration of your sentence time in federal prison. Let me say this now, because I know many of my critics will say, bro, what do you mean? Defund the DOJ and the BOP? How can that be done? Because the safety and the security of our country is tasked by the DOJ. To them, I say I understand, but let's be clear. I'm not naive to believe that the DOJ will be completely defunded. Let me state that clearly. I did use the words defund the DOJ and the BOP, but I know that's just not the reality. And I'm also saying that I don't even agree that it should be completely defunded. I do feel like there are purposes that the Department of Justice serve in their functions for defending the national interests of our country, which are justified. However, from my analysis and from the experiences and the research that I'm seeing, as well as others in this space who are working towards the reform of this criminal justice system, I do believe that certain divisions of the DOJ, the FBI, the DEA, the United States Attorney's Office, and the BOP in particular, should be defunded significantly as it relates specifically to African-American men and women, and in some cases, Hispanic men and women as well. And the reason why I'm saying that, in order for a real reduction to be made in the mass incarceration of African-American men, specifically African-American men and Hispanic men and women in general, as well as white American men and women, in order for these population numbers to go down, you have to decrease the flow of men and women coming in. It's not just simple enough to release men and women out of prison to decrease the size if you still have this massive inflow of people coming in. So in order to truly reduce prison size, you have to reduce the inflow as well as the current numbers of the people that are in for true reduction to take place, and for many of these places, the federal prisons throughout the country, if we're going to truly in our lifetime see a shutdown of these places, of the mass number of places of federal prisons throughout our country, which I'll get into some of those details here in this next piece. So let's talk more in detail about the other agency directly involved in incarcerating mass numbers of African-American men and women, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Here are some important statistics to know about the BOP. 1. The Bureau of Prisons is the largest correctional agency in the country in terms of the number of prisoners under its jurisdiction. As of 2021, the Bureau housed approximately 150,000 inmates in 122 facilities. The BOP's annual budget for every year is $9.3 billion. The majority of that $9 billion is spent on salaries and expenses and buildings and facilities. Statistic number 3. Currently, the BOP spends nearly $35,000 per inmate to house each man per year. Again, that's $35,000 per inmate. In some cases, I've seen reports where there is much as $50,000, and I think that number 50,000 also includes maybe some of the costs associated with the investigation as well as the litigation involved in convicting and sentencing, adjudicating men and women who are brought up in federal indictments. But for this argument, we'll just say, for our purposes, $35,000 per year to house each man in BOP's custody per year. So let's take a moment to do some numbers here. Use the federal prison that I'm standing outside of right now, for example, FCIL Reno. Currently, there are 1,000 men locked up at this facility. Using these BOP numbers, that calculates to $35 million per year needed to incarcerate the men at this facility. Again, some cases could be as much as $50 million. But again, we're using $35 million per year to house these men. To provide some further context, that would be the equivalent of what the NBA pays some of its top players like Steph Curry, $43 million a year, Chris Paul, $41 million a year, and Russell Westbrook, $41 million a year, as well as James Harden and John Wall at that same $41 million a year. In actuality, they get paid more than that per year. So again, I'll let that marinate for a minute. That's $35 million of American taxpayers' dollars being invested each year to keep one facility like this one up and running. You multiply that by the 121 more facilities like this one around the United States, and you can truly see how big of a number it takes our country in taxpayer dollars to house these men and women each year in these facilities in the custody of the BOP. Some further statistics that I want to just bring to the table so that you're totally kind of up to date and aware of these issues. There are, when you look at the BOP's population and its ethnic breakdown, 58% or 88,000 inmates in the BOP's populations are white, 59,000 or 38% of the BOP's population is African American, and 30% or 46,000 of the men and women in the BOP's custody are Hispanic. The rest of the population consists of Native Americans and Asians in really small numbers. If you compare these numbers, the breakdown of the population, and you compare that to the breakdown of the population in the United States overall, the United States population is where 76% of the total 329 million people in the U.S. are white. 13% of the United States population is African American, and 18% of the United States population is Hispanic. It's clear by using these numbers that the incarceration is a predominant problem for white, black, and Hispanic men. However, it is a disproportionate, larger problem for African American men and Hispanic men. You understand where a person's priorities are on how and where they spend their money. So, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, but most importantly, gained value from it, because again, this is such an important topic that we need to discuss, and we need to rally around to make sure that we make the types of changes that are going to make a difference in this arena. I definitely want to hear from you directly, so please leave your comments down below. I will respond to most feedback that's left within the first 30 days of this episode launch date. You can also visit us on any one of our social platforms at From Setbacks to Success. That's on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You also can reach us directly on our website. That's from setbacks, 2success.com. I want to give a big shout out to my producer, Buck at Black and Studios. If you have a podcast or a YouTube channel that you want to start, please make sure you shout them out and reach out to them. You can reach them at podcast@blackandstudios.com to get more information on how to get your YouTube channel and get your ideas going. Also, another big shout out to Van Jones and the Dream Corps USA Justice Project initiative. I'll include a link in this video as well as below to reach out and link up with them if this is a mission or this is a cause that you want to be involved in and active in and see these changes happen.